On April 17th, Iran's foreign minister stood before the cameras and told the world that the Strait of Hormuz was open. 24 hours later, it wasn't. I know what you're thinking. Another broken promise from Tehran. Another headline about a crisis that never quite resolves. But stay with me, because what happened in those 24 hours isn't a story about diplomacy failing. It's a story about something far more dangerous. It's the story of a government that no longer governs. This isn't a military story. It isn't even a nuclear story. This is a story about a state devouring itself from the inside, and doing it so efficiently, so systematically, that the rest of the world hasn't caught up to what it's actually watching. The institutions are still standing. The titles still exist. The press conferences still happen. But the authority behind them has been quietly hollowed out, transferred, absorbed, by an organization that answers to no election and no electorate. This is Iron Dispatch. I'm glad you're here. And if this kind of analysis matters to you, hit that subscribe button now, because the next few months in this region are going to move fast, and you'll want to be here when they do. Let's go back to April 17th. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi walks out and announces that all commercial vessels may transit the Strait of Hormuz freely. Markets breathe. Shipping indices tick upward. Analysts in London and Washington quietly note that back-channel negotiations through Pakistan appear to be producing results. The crisis, it seems, is easing. Then April 18th arrives. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, announces a full blockade of the strait. Not a partial restriction, not a temporary inspection protocol, a blockade. Araghchi's statement, issued less than 36 hours earlier by Iran's own foreign ministry, is rendered meaningless. Not contradicted, not revised, erased. Read that again. Iran's foreign minister, the person constitutionally responsible for Iran's foreign policy, made a major public declaration about one of the most strategically sensitive waterways on the planet, and a parallel military organization, not subordinate to his ministry, not answerable to his office, simply overruled him. No press conference, no formal reversal, no explanation offered to the international community. Just silence, followed by boats in the water and a closed strait. That is not a government. That is a government-shaped shell with a different engine running underneath it. Here's the number that changes this entire story: 3,000. That is the approximate size of the IRGC's so-called Mosquito fleet, over 3,000 Siraj 1 and Zulfikar-class fast attack boats positioned throughout the Persian Gulf and around the choke point of Hormuz. These are not symbolic vessels. They are the physical mechanism of IRGC control over Iranian foreign policy. When the IRGC wants the strait closed, it closes the strait. When the foreign ministry wants it open, it makes a press statement. The gap between those two sentences is where Iran's future is being decided. Before we go further, understand what Hormuz actually means in financial terms for Iran. Before the blockade, Iran was exporting approximately 1.85 million barrels of oil per day. That translated to roughly $150 million in daily revenue, the lifeblood of a sanctions-battered economy already running on a decade of accumulated damage. This is not discretionary income for the Iranian state. This is the oxygen. Remove it, and every other function of government, wages, subsidies, social contracts, the basic transaction between a regime and its people, begins to suffocate. The moment the IRGC closed the strait, that $150 million per day did not slow down. It stopped. Not reduced. Not rerouted. Gone. But here's the part that makes this genuinely catastrophic rather than merely painful. Iran's oil storage capacity is now completely full. Every tank, every depot, every floating reserve, at capacity. No empty barrels remain. With nowhere to store the oil that keeps pumping out of the ground, Iran faces an extraordinary deadline. Within 10 to 15 days of sustained blockade, the regime will be forced to physically shut down its own oil wells. Not because of sanctions, not because of American pressure, because the IRGC made a military decision that the civilian economy has no mechanism to survive. Think about the internal logic of that for a moment. The IRGC controls the blockade. The blockade destroys the revenue. The revenue destruction eventually destabilizes the regime that the IRGC claims to protect. It is a perfect, self-contained spiral. And the civilian government, the foreign minister, the elected parliament, the president's office, stands at the edge of it, watching, with no hand on any lever that matters. This is what institutional capture looks like when it reaches its terminal stage. The IRGC didn't arrive at this position overnight. For decades, it expanded laterally across the Iranian economy. Construction contracts, telecommunications infrastructure, import-export networks, petrochemical ventures. By the time Western analysts began documenting its economic footprint seriously, the IRGC had already become something no military organization should ever become. Too profitable to be disciplined, too embedded to be removed, and too powerful to be outranked by the very state it nominally served. And there's one more piece of this that most coverage gets completely wrong. The death of IRGC Naval Commander Alireza Tangsiri last month, killed in an Israeli strike, did not weaken the IRGC's grip on Iranian maritime strategy. It strengthened it. His death consolidated operational authority under a tighter circle of commanders, reduced internal dissent within the naval branch, and, critically, created a martyrdom narrative that insulates the IRGC from any civilian attempt to pull them back from the edge. In Iranian political culture, you do not publicly challenge the decisions of a force that is actively mourning a commander killed by Israel. The civilian government knows this. They are not trying to challenge the IRGC right now. They are trying to survive alongside it. That is a profoundly different posture, and it tells you everything about where the actual power in Tehran currently resides. Meanwhile, the external pressure being applied to Tehran is, by any historical standard, enormous. The United States has moved 75 separate categories of heavy military equipment into the region, approximately 15 million pounds of advanced weapon systems, now positioned within operational range of Iranian targets. 12 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft are currently stationed at Nevatim Air Base in Israel. 6 C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft landed at Pakistan's Nurian Air Base, a visible signal that American military logistics are actively threading through Iran's immediate neighborhood. AH-64 Apache helicopters and A-10 Thunderbolt ground attack aircraft have been specifically configured and deployed for one mission profile: the destruction of fast attack boats. The IRGC Mosquito fleet's greatest operational advantage is speed and numbers. The A-10 and Apache combination is designed to neutralize both, surgically, at scale, with a lethality that 3,000 small boats cannot disperse fast enough to escape. The second phase infrastructure of Operation Epic Wrath, the United States military contingency plan, is now being put in place. This is not posturing. Infrastructure takes time and money to position. You do not build phase 2 of an operation you are not prepared to execute. And yet here is the genuinely strange dimension of this crisis. Iran's negotiating position is not zero. Pakistan has been serving as the diplomatic corridor. The United States presented a 15-point framework for de-escalation. That framework was rejected. But a 10-point alternative, leaked to advisors close to Parliamentary Speaker Ghalibaf, was described as a basis for continued discussion. Iran has 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity sitting in its stockpiles. That material doesn't disappear from the negotiating table simply because the IRGC closed a strait. It is, in fact, the only card that guarantees Iran a seat at any table where the outcome matters. And Iranian diplomats know how to play it. They have been playing it for 20 years. So the civilian government, IRGC, Ghalibaf's network, the pragmatic technocrats who understand that $150 million per day represents something irreplaceable, they are not without leverage. They are without the ability to use it, because the IRGC doesn't negotiate on behalf of Iran. The IRGC negotiates on behalf of the IRGC. And this is the distinction that Western policymakers have spent 40 years struggling to operationalize. When you sanction Iran, you are often sanctioning the wrong institution. The IRGC's economic empire was built, in part, as a sanction-proof architecture. Its revenues route through intermediaries, through shell companies, through regional proxies with their own revenue streams. The oil money that the civilian government needs and the IRGC controls flows through channels that a foreign ministry press statement cannot redirect. When IRGC announced Hormuz was open on April 17th, he may have genuinely believed he had secured IRGC agreement, or he may have been testing whether any agreement he secured would hold. Either way, the answer arrived within 24 hours. It did not hold. It evaporated. And the world watching that evaporation learned something that Iran's civilian officials have lived with for years. The foreign ministry is a performance. The IRGC is the policy. What comes next hinges on a question that nobody in Washington, Brussels, or Islamabad can answer cleanly. Is there a faction inside the IRGC that understands the trajectory of this spiral and is alarmed by it? There are analysts who argue yes. that the loss of $150 million per day, the approach of well-shut-down deadlines, the visible buildup of American strike capability, that these pressures will eventually find expression inside the IRGC's own command structure, that a split will emerge between those who see confrontation as existential vindication and those who see it as operational suicide. There are others who argue that the IRGC's institutional identity is now so fused with resistance posture that any internal faction advocating retreat would be politically destroyed before it could act. That the martyrdom of Tangsiri has already shifted the internal emotional register in ways that make compromise feel like betrayal. Both readings are probably partially correct, and the uncertainty between them is precisely where this crisis lives. It is not being resolved in Islamabad's back channels. It is not being resolved at the UN. It is being resolved, or not resolved, in conversations that happen inside buildings in Tehran that no foreign intelligence service can fully see into. What we can say with clarity is this: the civilian government of Iran is not governing Iran. It is narrating Iran. It is producing the statements, hosting the diplomatic channels, accepting the meetings with Pakistani intermediaries, discussing the 10-point frameworks. And behind every statement it makes, there is a parallel organization with 3,000 fast attack boats, 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, and no electoral accountability, watching to see whether the civilian government's words are useful to its objectives. When they are, they stand. When they aren't, they disappear overnight. That is the real threat Iran faces. Not the A-10s at the edge of the Gulf, not the Growlers at Nevatim, not the 6 C-17s at Nurian. Those threats are external, visible, countable, and, crucially, negotiable. The IRGC is none of those things. It is internal. It is partially invisible. It is not easily counted in any framework that Western negotiators understand. And it is not, in any meaningful sense, at the negotiating table. Every deal that gets made will have to survive the IRGC's veto. Every opening, every back channel, every carefully constructed diplomatic framework. It all runs through an organization that proved, on April 18th, that it has no interest in being constrained by the words of a foreign minister. Iran is not losing to America. Iran is losing to itself. And the tragedy, if that word applies, is that the people losing hardest are the ones who never held the controls. The civilians, the technocrats, the diplomats who fly to Islamabad and Geneva and New York, who craft their frameworks and count their points, who believe, perhaps sincerely, that the next agreement will be the one that holds. The story isn't over, not even close. The oil storage clocks are ticking. The military buildup is not decorating the horizon, it is populating it. Pakistan's diplomats are still in motion, and somewhere inside the IRGC command structure, a calculation is being made that will determine whether the next move is a deal, a disaster, or something that makes both of those words feel inadequate. We will be here when that move comes. Do you think there is still a realistic path where Iran's civilian government regains meaningful control over foreign policy? Or has the IRGC's institutional grip already passed the point of no return? Let us know in the comments below.